watch the waveform display. Those are single travels on each axis, but when you go in between, the more interesting sounds start happening. Now we're going to hold this pitch constant. We're going to modulate one of the waveform axes using an envelope generator. Slow that down a bit. As you can hear, once you start modulating with control voltages, you start hearing little hints of natural sonic behavior as the waveforms change faster than your hands can move them. I'm now adding LFOs to the other waveform axes, so the sounds will slowly morph over time. Piston Honda's CV inputs have been greatly improved in this version. Not only do they accept negative voltages for a full input range of plus minus 10 volts, the sampling rate is much higher, so you can have audio rate modulation on pretty much any of the inputs and generate musically meaningful sidebands from whatever fast-moving signals you'd like to put in. So I will increase the speed of one of the LFOs here. And now the other. I've always loved wavetable synthesizers, and I think that my duty as a designer of such a module is to offer all the available options that have been well known from past wavetable instruments. My main influences here would be the Waldorf microwave and the Prophet VS. And though there's some waveforms in the Piston Honda's memory bank that are influenced by those instruments, I think that the waveforms themselves are just a small part of the character of those classic instruments. So for the Piston Honda, I've added the unison detune behavior. We can go into the menu here, select unison, now we have this nice animated effect. Let's morph to a couple different waveforms to understand the character a little better. The menu system on the Piston Honda stores several less commonly used parameters, such as the unison effect, octave shift. You can disable morphing for any of the waveform axes. This is what it sounds like with all axes turned off and moving the sliders. In that mode, the smoothness is gone, and you can select that for each axis. Get out of Piston Honda Mark III is a dual oscillator. I'm going to patch the mix output into our setup here so we can listen to the outputs of both oscillators at once. This button here links the two oscillators so that they're all reading from the master pitch set from oscillator A. We can detune for additional chorusing effect. We have shared waveform controls here on the sliders. To select an oscillator, use these two select buttons. The selected oscillator is shown on the display, and then you may modify the waveform. Go back to viewing both, and now we see that the oscillators have been set to different waveforms. When both are selected, when you move the controls, both waveforms get modified. So let's set oscillator B to a simple sine wave again. Go back to oscillator A so we can demonstrate some more effects. We're now listening to the oscillator output of A. The external input jack is present on both oscillators. It accepts an audio rate signal, and its default mode is to have through 0 FM applied to the oscillator. On Piston Honda Mark III, the output of one oscillator is normaled to the external input jack of the other, so you can get a nice effect by moving the control without using any additional patch cables. So now we'll introduce oscillator B's sine wave into the oscillator A's frequency control. It sounds nice and harmonically coherent because the frequencies of the oscillators are the same. The alternate mode for the oscillator is the external input mode, where the oscillator output is not that of the internally generated oscillator, but the external audio signal being shaped through the selected wavetable. So we're now putting the sine wave of oscillator A through the wavetable of oscillator B. In this mode, the large knob becomes the gain control going into the wave shaper. And the wave shape selection becomes the transfer function through which the audio will be processed. And of course, that's voltage controllable as well. Let's stick an LFO on there. And also change the wavetable. So we're still sending a sine wave through that wave shape. So if we put something more complicated into that input, it will generate many more harmonics. It also works great on guitars, drum loops, voice, any other kind of audio that you can imagine. The effects become more violent the more natural the sound you put in. I like that inversion. So, the Piston Honda is the first example of the Mark III series of modules from industrial music electronics. The distinguishing feature there is in the upper right-hand corner of this module, the preset manager. The preset manager has been designed to collect and recall 8 sound settings very quickly. It's not meant to be like a traditional synthesizer's preset storage system where you spend a few minutes typing in a name and everything. It's meant to very quickly program a sound that you may access manually or through CV. So let's turn that preset manager on. You can see up on the screen it says preset, and it's displaying the waveforms and the assorted settings. So let's click through the memory here. Now I'm going to plug the preset CV into another LFO. And we're going to scan the preset memory by a control voltage. And you can use the attenuator. A special feature of the preset manager is that you may also morph between presets. So I'm going to switch the preset manager into morph mode, and as I turn up the attenuator, you will now hear the LFO changing the entire state of the front panel in response to the control voltage with smooth behavior. The preset manager is meant to be an aid for sound design or live performance, and there are menu options that allow you to boot up any Mark III module into whatever preset mode that you wish, so you don't have to spend a lot of time clicking the buttons on each one to get to the mode that you need if you're already patched up and ready to go. There are other features here. Let me get back to the main menu here. Preset menu includes a random patch generator. Actually, let's listen to both oscillators while we generate random patches. Yes. Yes, you can choose the scope of what the preset manager acts on. By default, it's set to waves only, which is the 3 waveform controls and their attenuverters, as well as the FM and CV attenuverters as well. If you set it to all parameters, it also controls the master frequency controls, so you can use the preset manager to set your master pitch for each track in a performance, or use it as a sort of crude sequencer. So. We're going to go into a different menu now and set our control option for the preset manager to triggered random. In this mode, the preset CV input will instead accept a rising edge to generate a new random patch. You can hear the changes in the deep menu options as well, such as the disabling of the morphing on the axes, the octave settings, and the unison. So even though it's at most changing 16 parameters in the scope that I have it set to, you can access a wide array of sounds. And the random patch generator has been created to be aware of what its various parameters are doing. It knows the context of different settings, and it hits sweet spots more often than not. You won't really have dead signals when you're generating random data in this way. So there's a great open source software program out there called WaveEdit by the Synthesis Technology Corporation, created for use with their E352 synthesizer module. It generates waveforms in response to user input, very nice collections of 16-bit waveforms, 64 in one file. Those are compatible with the Piston Honda Mark III. So you can create and audition the waveforms on your computer much easier than the means that we had for the Mark II. Then when you're done creating, you can use the onboard micro SD slot to upload a new set of waveforms to the module. You have to replace all 8 files at once. The factory waveset contains some standard waveforms inspired from classic synthesizers, some noisy square wave based ones, and then 4 special banks from various modular artists. Are there any questions at this point? Yes?
So obviously, if your wavetable is normalized at, full gate resolution, then your square wave is dramatically louder than your sine wave.
Yes.
Does it have an option for normalizing by perceptive volume so that you can go through it without having vast changes in overall volume?
Not within the module, but one of my banks, the LFSR-based one, I had to apply such a normalization before I encoded it into the memory. The WaveEdit program that I've just mentioned does have such facility for adjusting the volume of your bank. You're feeding back a little. Did we lose video again? Yes. Hold on a second. All right, looks like our video is back. Do we have any other questions about the basic operation of the module or the preset manager design? Yes?
When you save a preset, how much of the front panel actually gets saved? Is it all knob positions?
Well, if you go into the menu here, I don't think you can see it under this lighting condition, but the first option is called preset scope. So it has 2 settings, waves only and all parameters. Yes, all parameters will store all the knob positions. Waves only will only do the right side, the attenuators and the sliders for the waveform selection. And the preset also stores the various menu options like the octave setting, the morph enable, and the unison. And the way that works with regards to selection, when you're in the normal preset mode, in the normal mode, when you shift to a new preset by CV or manually, it'll do all the button and menu settings as you change each one. In the morph mode, you select the base preset by using the encoder to manually select. That sets the discrete settings, the menu options and the buttons. That sets those for the entire morph. And then when you apply the CV to smoothly morph to the next preset, that acts on the knob parameters to smoothly morph. So you select the base with the encoder, and then the knobs are virtually changed in response to the preset voltage. Yes. Oh, yes.
What is your interpolation algorithm?
It's linear. It's nothing special, and I don't. No, this one I didn't have any inline assembly to do it. The processor was fast enough. I don't think I ran into any difficulties getting all those morphs to run. The preset morphs internally run at a lower priority than all the stuff going on to generate the waveforms in the first place, but I've not noticed any sluggishness. I think it's just that it's a PIC32 processor running at 200 megahertz, and though the preset morph is running at the lowest priority compared to the synthesis algorithm and some of the peripherals, you don't hear it. You can modulate the presets at audio rate, and it sounds pretty okay in my opinion. Let's have a listen to that. So yeah, the preset morph runs at audio rates okay, in my opinion. This is the first entry in the Mark III series. This year we will introduce several more modules containing this standard preset manager interface. It's possible to use any passive multiple to send a single voltage to a number of Mark III modules that will behave similarly. Editing the presets is fairly straightforward. You go to the standard preset mode. So we're listening to a plain sound without any modulation. In the preset mode, if you tap the encoder, the word editing will appear in the display. Now, any knob motions you make or button presses or other parameter changes, when the editing is active, those will be written to the memory. Tap it again to exit. When you're in the standard preset mode here, you can change the controls however you like, but the changes won't be written to the memory unless you're in the editing mode. When you're in the morph mode, you cannot modify the sliders or any other controls that are under the control of the preset manager. Instead, the single morph CV takes over the control of that, and you can scan between the panel states using that CV. The CV inputs, on the other hand, will continue to work in the morph mode. So the Piston Honda is the first example of the preset manager. Our next issue will be the Hertz Donut Mark III, which is a 3-operator FM synthesizer. The idea is directly applicable to a number of different module designs. Like, imagine, for example, a granular synthesizer where you are smoothly morphing between a number of different preset states, resulting in a number of very different sonic behaviors from a single common sound source. This preset manager design has been made to be flexible under any kind of synthesis function, and this year we hope to release several designs that exploit it to its fullest. Yes, in the back there. Yes. Mm-hmm. Yes.
What happens if halfway through the cycle of that, you now drop it and continue up? What happens to the morphing? What happens to the morphing process in that case?
Okay, for the preset morphing, we can listen to that right now. I do have a sawtooth LFO in my case. I don't know if it's an upward or a downward going saw, but let's give it a try. So now I will remove it in the middle. So it just snaps back to the base value if there's no control voltage applied or if the sawtooth resets. The instantaneous state of the sound that you're hearing in the morph mode is determined by the value of the control voltage that's going into that input. Correct. Yeah, it doesn't snap to preset states in the morph mode. Okay. Did you have a question?
Oh yeah, I was just wondering, do you have the Time Safari Mark III somewhere in the works?
At the minute, there is no Time Safari Mark III planned. The Mark II is coming back into production soon with completely rewritten firmware. The Time Safari Mark II, unlike most of the other Mark IIs, has fast CV inputs that can, in certain conditions, read negative voltages. So, seeing that that hardware still had a bit of life in it, we are in the process of rewriting the firmware so it's has a nice rubbery, elasticy feel when modulated. It's more useful for delays, less crackles when you're trying to set tight loops. So that will happen sometime this summer when we will make a small number back in production. We don't have a Mark III Time Safari planned at all, but we are working on some other type of audio recording device that it's a different idea, but it's also a lot of fun.
Would it be possible to update a Mark II to the newer firmware?
Yes, all the firmware, the hardware is not changing from the ones that I built a few years ago to the ones that we will make, so the firmware will be directly compatible. Yes.
How long is your development cycle on a new module?
It's hard to say. I got a lot faster at things over 2017. I bought some software that had some nice features, like my PCB layout time has been more than cut in half due to some nice convenience features that have been added. PCB layout is one of the more time-consuming things that I do. It's hard to say because for Piston Honda, that was the first actual device to be made from the Mark III design. And I believe I brought up the first prototype in November 2017. I spent about 4 months programming until I was able to send it out to my beta tester. And took another month and a half until we were able to release something. I think the rest of the Mark IIIs will go a little quicker. Obviously, the hardware differs from unit to unit, not only in user interface, but there are special interactions between the software program and the actual voltages that you can get out of the output. In the Mark II series, we played around a lot with the characteristics of the analog to digital converters as a means of imitating the character of some classic devices. The hardware-software interplay continues in this Mark III series, but now the focus is on higher resolutions, higher sampling rates, more responsive behavior to the control voltages. Yes?
What are the input and output sampling rates?
The sampling rate of the audio in the Piston Honda Mark III is 48 kilohertz. And the control voltage sampling rate, it's hard to say. I haven't calculated it. The processor that I'm using, the PIC32, has a really nice high-speed analog digital converter unit whose native sampling rate is somewhere around 12 megahertz. I mean, it's a bit noisy at that rate, especially if your PCB layout isn't 100%, but also the sampling rate is high enough that you may filter it and multiplex it however you like and still have an effective sampling rate that is perceptually smooth to the user in terms of audio rate modulation. I don't have a measurement for you, but there's quite a lot of multiplexing going on in there. But I'm very pleased with the result, especially when you're audio rate modulating the frequency through the standard CV input. I think it's good enough, as I like to say. Yes, Thomas.
Can you tell us more about the 4 special waveform banks that you mentioned?
The 4 special waveform banks, the ones that others have made?
Yes.
Okay. I've asked a couple of my friends to contribute waveforms for the Piston Honda Mark III's factory wave set. I wrote 4 of them myself, but I did not want to write the remaining 4 because I wanted some very different outside perspectives on the upper half of the waveform bank. I don't recall the order that they're in the memory, but the 4 artists that contributed to the wave set. There's Surichai. I'm sure some of you guys are familiar with his work. He created a wave set that has interesting alternations between waveforms. So though you may be smoothly morphing along the x-axis, there's little bumps and skips along the entire travel. It feels disruptive unless you modulate both the x and the y diagonally in a very specific way. Rodent also contributed a wave set. I don't have the specifics of how he created his waves, but to me they have a natural character. I don't know if he processed any pre-recorded sounds or what. There is also a guy from England called Radek Rudnicki. He created a wave set that he calls Twisted. And to my ears, that wave set has a lot of high frequency content, kind of FM-y kind of character. I don't recall where it is in the wave set, otherwise we'd be listening to it. And let's see, search I rodent. I'm trying to remember the 4th one. Let's take a listen. Sorry, I'm drawing a blank on who the 4th user is. Yeah, Joey Blush Response. I'll be delivering his unit to him at Super Booth. His wave set is also nice, but what I like about the 4 people that I picked is that they all took a completely different approach to generating their waves. I know most, if not all of them, used the Wave Edit program to do it, but the results are entirely different from each other and from my more standard waveforms in the earlier part of the memory. Yes?
So, you can get PCM audio of this then, right?
You could. The way that the oscillator oscillates is that it reads and interpolates in chunks of 256 samples. So if you'd like to work in terms of, slices of PCM, you can actually import files into Wave Edit and it'll do the chopping for you. But the way the Piston Honda is going to interpret that, it's going to cycle through 256 samples. So it's the responsibility of yourself to make sure that that window moves accordingly to get the effect that you want. Do we have any other questions? Yes.
Can you talk a little bit about the envelope generator VCA that you're using?
Of course. This guy here with the homemade panel is the single Andre. It is meant to be a less expensive and smaller version of our double Andre envelope VCA module. As such, it's only 12 HP, and its feature set has been carefully selected to be appropriate for small single-row systems. With the Piston Honda Mark III, the double Andre, some LFOs, and a sequencer like the Stilson Hammer, this single case is a full two-voice synthesizer. So I've been feeding the Piston Honda through the single Andre's VCA. It's a single Andre is a dual ADSR envelope generator coupled to a single low-pass gate circuit. So, is that me or? Yeah, it's not coming from me. Yes.
Hold on, just one. Connections are good. Should be good then.
All right.
Okay.
Much better. FCC.
Turn up again on that.
Okay, that's much better. So we have this running in VCA mode. Now it's running in VCA VCF combo mode. So it's a VCA based low pass gate. Now we can go to the filter mode. Simple 2-pole low pass filter. I'm going to run a sequence for this because you get a much better feel for the character of the module when it's actually being modulated by an envelope. So let's just give it a simple repeating sequence of gates. Go to VCA mode. As you can hear, the single Andre has a voltage-controlled velocity input. So any voltage arriving at that input is sampled by the module when it receives an envelope trigger. So the envelope has full ADSR controls. But there's also a shape control that fades from linear to analog. That is log attack, expo release. So you have full control over the snappiness of the behavior. It varies from mode to mode. Right now we're listening to it in VCA mode, so let's hear what it sounds like using the dynamic envelope in the combo mode. And now we'll listen to just the filter mode. Back to VCA. We aim to release the single Andre in June, along with the Hertz Donut Mark III, along with a restock of Stilson Hammer.